by qualified academic, administrative, and service personnel. In October 1996, SEAMEO RETRAC started operation with only 6 employees, but over the years, the center's staff has continually increased to better meet the organization's growth. The center's leadership and staff follow our core values of excellence, professionalism, integrity and commitment, collaboration and partnership, flexibility, creativity and innovation, and social responsibilities. To meet SEAMEO member countries' increasing demand for quality training programs in our priority areas, SEAMEO RETRAC focuses on the following priority areas: educational leadership and management, language education, educational technology, educational quality, equity and inclusiveness, quality assurance and accreditation for education, technical and vocational education and training TVET, life skills and 21st century skills. SEAMEO RETRAC envisions becoming a regional center of excellence in the field of education and educational leadership and management in Southeast Asia and beyond. SEAMEO RETRAC provides SEAMEO member countries, especially Cambodia, Laos PDR, Myanmar, and Vietnam with relevant programs of excellence such as research, training, consultancy, information dissemination, networking, and partnerships. In addition, SEAMEO RETRAC offers language training, teacher training, information and communication technology, and other training programs customized for the region's needs. SEAMEO RETRAC's vision is to become a regional center of excellence focusing on 3 key result areas: regional leadership, regional visibility, and establishing a solid resource base. Towards regional leadership, SEAMEO RETRAC leads programs in educational leadership and management, for language instruction and assessment, integration of ICT for teaching and learning, teacher professional development, research and project development, corporate trainings, overseas studies consultancy. Towards regional visibility, SEAMEO RETRAC leads activities in international cooperation, inter-center collaboration, internship and staff exchange, and community outreach. Towards establishing a solid resource base, SEAMEO RETRAC is committed to human resource development, infrastructure development, financial visibility, effective management, to build trust and transparency. In 2017, SEAMEO RETRAC was certified under the ISO 9001:2015 organization accreditation. In recognition of our efforts and achievements, in 2016, SEAMEO RETRAC was awarded the Achievement Medal by the Prime Minister of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and the second-class labor honor granted by the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. In pursuit of these priorities, SEAMEO RETRAC will develop regional curriculums, pilot cross-regional online training, facilitate workshops, convene conferences and forums, conduct research, organize overseas training, and share our lessons learned in reports and journals. With our history, vision, expertise, and ambitions in mind, we thank you for your interest in SEAMEO RETRAC. Through collaboration, we can reach our shared aims in education, science, and culture in Southeast Asia and beyond. The Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization SEAMEO is a regional intergovernmental organization established in 1965 among the governments of Southeast Asian countries to promote regional cooperation in education, science, and culture. Vietnam, readmitted as a SEAMEO member state in 1992, hosts the SEAMEO Regional Training Center, SEAMEO RETRAC, in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. SEAMEO RETRAC is mission-driven to assist SEAMEO member countries in identifying and addressing issues of education and educational leadership and management. The SEAMEO RETRAC Governing Board is the main policy-making body of the center. The Governing Board consists of 1 representative from each of the 11 SEAMEO member countries. The center is headed by the director, who is nominated by the Minister of Education and Training of Vietnam, approved by the SEAMEO RETRAC Governing Board, and officially appointed by the SEAMEO Council President. The center is staffed by qualified academic, administrative, and service personnel. In October 1996, SEAMEO RETRAC started operation with only 6 employees, but over the years, the center's staff has continually increased to better meet the organization's growth. The center's leadership and staff follow our core values of excellence, professionalism, integrity and commitment, collaboration and partnership, flexibility, creativity and innovation, and social responsibilities. To meet SEAMEO member countries' increasing demand for quality training programs in our priority areas, SEAMEO RETRAC focuses on the following priority areas: educational leadership and management, language education, educational technology, educational quality, equity and inclusiveness, quality assurance and accreditation for education, technical and vocational education and training TVET, life skills and 21st century skills. SEAMEO RETRAC envisions becoming a regional center of excellence in the field of education and educational leadership and management in Southeast Asia and beyond. SEAMEO RETRAC provides SEAMEO member countries, especially Cambodia, Lao PDR, Myanmar, and Vietnam with relevant programs of excellence such as research, training, consultancy, information dissemination, networking, and partnerships. In addition, SEAMEO RETRAC offers language training, teacher training, information and communication technology, and other training programs customized for the region's needs. SEAMEO RETRAC's vision is to become a regional center of excellence focusing on 3 key result areas: regional leadership, regional visibility, and establishing a solid resource base. Towards regional leadership, SEAMEO RETRAC leads programs in educational leadership and management, language instruction and assessment, integration of ICT for teaching and learning, teacher professional development, research and project development, corporate trainings, overseas studies consultancy. Towards regional visibility, SEAMEO RETRAC leads activities in international cooperation, inter-center collaboration, internship and staff exchange, and community outreach. Towards establishing a solid resource base, SEAMEO RETRAC is committed to human resource development, infrastructure development, financial visibility, effective management, to build trust and transparency. In 2017, SEAMEO RETRAC was certified under the ISO 9001:2015 organization accreditation. In recognition of our efforts and achievements, in 2016, SEAMEO RETRAC was awarded the Achievement Medal by the Prime Minister of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam and the second-class labor honor granted by the President of the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. In pursuit of these priorities, SEAMEO RETRAC will develop regional curriculums, pilot cross-regional online training, facilitate workshops, convene conferences and forums, conduct research, organize overseas training, and share our lessons learned in reports and journals. With our history, vision, expertise, and ambitions in mind, we thank you for your interest in SEAMEO RETRAC. Through collaboration, we can reach our shared aims in education, science, and culture in Southeast Asia and beyond.
Hi, Melita. I'm checking if you can hear me well.
I can. How are you?
Okay, please share your screen after my introduction.
Okay. All right, can you see me?
1:30 p.m. In Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. So ladies and gentlemen, we just 1 more minute to wait for some more participants to get in. So it is 1:30. Let's go. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is John Fogle, Head of Department of Research and Project Development at SEAMEO RETRAC, speaking from Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar, Enhancing Information Literacy for Academic Professional Development. First, on behalf of SEAMEO Regional Training Center, SEAMEO RETRAC, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to American Spaces and the Regional English Language Office, RELO, under the U.S. Mission Vietnam for their collaboration in organizing this program. For those of you who may not be familiar with SEAMEO RETRAC, we are a regional center under the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, SEAMEO, and Vietnam's Ministry of Education and Training. Our mission is to support SEAMEO member countries in identifying and addressing issues in education. From February to June 2025, SEAMEO RETRAC, in partnership with American Spaces, U.S. Mission Vietnam, American Center, U.S. Consulate General in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, is hosting a series of in-person workshops titled Access to American Academia, Information Literacy and Research Skills at the American Center in Ho Chi Minh City. This program is designed for 37 educators and graduate students, equipping them with essential skills in locating, evaluating, and utilizing information for academic research. In addition to these in-person workshops, we are organizing 2 webinars, one today, February 28th, and another one on February the 25th, to extend this learning opportunity to a wider audience beyond Ho Chi Minh City. We are thrilled that today's webinar has attracted nearly 1,200 participants from Vietnam and across the region. The session is being conducted on Zoom and streamed live on YouTube, allowing us to bring together educators, researchers, and professional engagement in this important discussion. Now, it is my honor to introduce today's speaker, Ms. Melita Fogle. Before we begin, let me share a brief introduction about her. Melita Fogle is a U.S. Department of State English Language Fellow based in Hanoi, Vietnam. Melita teaches English for academic purposes, English for occupational purposes, English for specific purposes, and English as a medium of instruction, supporting English language programs at the U.S. Embassy Hanoi's American Center. Melita, who was born in San Francisco, California, and raised in the Bay Area, has been a higher education teacher and teacher trainer for over 20 years, both in the United States and abroad. Integrated educational technology is a particular interest, and Melita advocates for contextualizing the use of tech tools like artificial intelligence with learning theories to provide her adult student structure and meaningful assessment. Melita is a lifelong learner who never stops being curious. So once again, I would like to welcome all of you to the webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. And now please welcome Ms. Melita, who will lead today's webinar. We have the Zoom sessions and all those another session on the YouTube live. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Melita.
So thank you, Mr. Lin. I appreciate that wonderful introduction. I need to ask a question. Will I be sharing my screen with the presentation, or will you be sharing the presentation from SEAMEO?
You share, please. Yeah. You have the right to
I will share?
Yes.
Okay. So knowing that now, I will go ahead and make sure that I have the presentation ready. And while I get that ready, give me 1 second. While I get that ready, I want to thank you all for coming. Let's see. Here we go. All right. I want to thank you all for coming and to just welcome you first to this wonderful opportunity for professional development, and also just to say we as fellows, we always want opportunities like this to be able to reach out and hopefully create a sustained training, meaning it goes beyond just today. So I hope that that will, and I hope that you can see my screen in just 1 minute, but I hope that that will be the outcome for today, that this won't be a one-off seminar or webinar for you, but the beginning of something really meaningful. And I want to say that I'm excited to be here. If you hear me cough every once in a while, I've had a hard time shaking a cough that I've had, and I hope that it won't disturb you too much, and I hope I won't cough too much. And as far as, so I'm having trouble sharing my screen, Mr. Lane. Can you all see that? Is everybody able to see my screen?
I have not yet seen your screen. Yes, we can see it now. Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, it took quite a while actually to come up, so I'm glad that you can see it now. Also, it needs to be in present mode, so let me see if I can move it on to, okay, so it's going to take a minute. I want to say, as far as photos or any kind of audio, if you want to have this as an opportunity for American Spaces to share and promote our programs, great. If you do not want to be seen, I would just say, please keep your camera off. It is possible that screenshots will be taken just to promote our programs. That would be for American Center or American Hangouts or any other American Spaces in Vietnam. It is not to anything else, and it's certainly not to sell anything. And I would have some patience if we have some issues with tech at the moment, is put my presentation in present mode, and for some reason it's just not cooperating, but hopefully we'll get there in a minute. If not, we will just work with what we have. I also want to let you know that we will have 2 breaks. We are working through modules in this webinar, and we will have 2 breaks, one between modules 2 and 3, and a second break between modules 4 and 5. That's to give you a chance to just breathe, maybe stretch, get something to drink, but to give you a chance to reflect on what we're learning today. So please feel free to use the chat feature if you have questions. I think we have moderators who are taking a look at the chat and who are paying attention to all that you have to say, whether you have a comment or a question. And to add value to what we're doing, it is helpful to have questions. It is helpful to know whether or not you're following along and you understand what we're talking about. So please feel free to use the chat for that purpose. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. I think I'm not going to be able to put this in presentation mode for now. So here's our overview. I want to say that these modules are going to be, but they should also be interactive. And so there are quizzes built in, there are activities built in, and there are some polls that are built in. You are going to need your mobile phone and the ability to read QR codes, because there are some QR codes scattered throughout this, the time that we're going to share together for the next 2.5 hours. So let's move on. Welcome. This what I was trying to say about the consent for photographic image and audio. If a screenshot is taken, it's not to make you uncomfortable, it's just to promote American Center or American Spaces in Vietnam. Our learning objectives, of course, are to understand information literacy, digital literacy, and media literacy. And what are our professional responsibilities, and how can we become creative users and creators in the 21st century? That's really what this is about. We're trying to figure out how any of this is going to be useful to us or to our students or to our clients. I'm not entirely sure who everyone is in the webinar today, so our first interactive poll hopefully will give me some clue. So, would you mind taking your phone and using your camera feature to open this QR code and participate in our first interactive poll? Give me an idea of who you are so I can address you properly, whether you are a researcher, an educator, a student, or someone else. Let me know. And on my other laptop to my other side over here, I can hopefully take a look at your responses. So go ahead and do that now. I'd like to give you about 3 minutes. Mr. Lin Chang, do you see any comments or questions in the chat?
Not yet. But please check the sound from your side or the internet connection. It seems that we have a kind of distracted sound from your side. Thank you.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out what's all about. So can you characterize the sound again? It's just, is it a... Mr. Lin?
Yes.
Did I lose you?
Okay.
Sorry. So there is a distracting sound?
It's okay now. Yeah, let's go.
Okay. All right. So I have given the participants about 3 minutes to open the QR code and respond to the poll. And I'm hoping that they will be doing that. I'm taking a look. I don't see any responses yet. Okay, we do have responses. This is great. All right, let me take a look at, we've got about 43 responses. All right, wow, a big variety, a large mix of folks. We've got a senior education program specialist, students, administrators, educators, a designer, okay. There's someone who will become a researcher. Congratulations to you. All right, great. Mostly educators and students. This is wonderful. Thank you for doing that. We can continue with receiving responses to that poll throughout the webinar. But for now, let's move on. So it looks like I'm addressing people who are very squarely in the education space, who are hopefully going to do a lot of benefiting from our webinar today. That pleases me. All right, so let's move on. So our first module, we're going to be talking about technological literacy. Now, of course, there are different types of technological literacy, right? In the old days, we had libraries. We did things in an analog style. We would go to a building and we would take a scroll or a book and we would use it to gain knowledge. Of course, we would have to read that scroll, or we would have to read that book, and we would have to do something with that information. Well, we don't have to do that anymore. Information is now at a touch of a button, and it's actually exciting and even a little bit terrifying how quickly the knowledge base of the world changes. It used to be in the thousands of years, and then the hundreds of years, and then decades. And now the knowledge base of the world really basically changes in seconds. So all of that information is not all critical. It's not all necessary or useful. We have to be discerners of knowledge and information, and being able to do that in the 21st century with so many tools, high-tech tools, at our disposal, that could be daunting. It could be a bit overwhelming. So hopefully we can start to see through this webinar what is useful to us, what we can use, and how we can use it. So let's talk about core skills. Information literacy. It's really the ability to find and use information. It's thinking about how to evaluate information reliably. What's quality information? As I said, not all information is useful or even good, right? Not all of it is even accurate. Some of it is fake. We've learned that very recently, that we can't always rely on the information available to us. So we have to think about, how do we evaluate, and then what do we share? And thinking about the ethical concerns of information. This is all that information literacy entails. We also have digital literacy. So digital literacy is slightly different. It's understanding how computers, tablets, phones, and smartphones, well, any phone, but particularly smartphones, how they work. How do we troubleshoot the use of these devices? But also, we need to understand how to navigate online spaces. We need to think about digital content, and we need to figure out how to create it. If we're going to go a step further from just being consumers to creators, we also need to think about protecting our privacy and the privacy of the people who consume what we create. That's all a part of digital literacy. And of course, the ethical concerns of digital literacy. And finally, we need media literacy. So social media is huge. We're all probably on some social media platform, whether it's Facebook or TikTok or WhatsApp. That's actually social networking, but it has some social media features. But whatever we're using or whatever we're consuming, we have to think about how it works, how we consume the information and the messages that are put out through those platforms. And we have to think about how to be critical consumers of that information. What do we share? Ethically, what is our responsibility? And that word responsibility comes up a lot when we talk about information, digital, and media literacy, because just as most things have a power for good, they also have a power for, well, not so good. And we can use them well, or we can use them badly. So we have these three types of literacy that we'll be talking about today. And hopefully, if you have any questions as we go along, as I said, to add value to this discussion, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat. It'll be helpful for me because I can't see you. Basically, all I see right now is my own screen. So it will definitely help me to help you if I know what you're thinking.
I'm sorry, Melita.
So,
I'm sorry to interrupt
yes?
you. So, I received some messages from the inbox that there's a problem with the sound. So maybe you adjust the microphone from your laptop a little bit. Maybe it's a problem with that.
Oh, Whew, okay. I'm not sure what I can do to change the sound quality. So is it that you cannot hear me at all, or the
No,
sound
we
is
can
very
hear. We
low?
can hear everything. However, there is just a kind of tack 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 sound. You know, it distracts people by the sound. Maybe this is a problem with the micro. A kind of static noises. Yes.
Yeah, this is problematic for me because I don't hear it at all, and I don't actually know how to troubleshoot that. Oh, sorry. Let me see if there's. Um, hmm.
And one more thing, could you press the presentation button because your screen has not been fully shared?
Yeah, I hope I can. Let's see if it will let me. I'm sorry, I'm not able to get Gamma to cooperate with me right now. And I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know how to with the microphone. Let me see if there's something I can do here. Just 1 second. Okay. With the sound quality, does that help?
Yes, okay, just please share your screen and go ahead. And we see if it's a problem from our side. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, because now I've sort of turned down the internal speaker on my laptop to hopefully clarify the sound. It also has dampened to hear you. So can you let me know if that's okay, if this is better?
Yeah, it's better. It's better now, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. Yay. I feel better now. I
Thank
hope
you
that it will
kindly
continue
for your
to be all
contact.
right.
Just walk now. Let's go ahead. Thank you. I'm sorry for
Okay,
the
good.
technical problem.
All right. Okay, and as far as the screen is concerned, how's this? Is this better?
Okay, just go ahead.
All right. Okay, well, I hope that everything works out from this point on. Except that my screen is quite slow. Wow, quite slow. Quite slow. I actually can't. All right. So are you able to see the information literacy cycle on this? Oh, yes or no?
Yes, we can see it clearly. Thank you. Go ahead.
Wonderful. Okay, so to carry on with what I was talking about with regard to information literacy. So remember, we have our 3 types of technological literacy that we need to consider today: information literacy, digital literacy, and media literacy. So in the information literacy cycle, we need these 6 kinds of actions. We need to recognize a need, right? Maybe we are a student and we have to write a paper. If we have to write a research paper, we're going to need to locate information. But as I said, not all information is good. So we're going to need to evaluate the quality of the information that we get. And we need to organize it in a way that is useful for us, considering our perspective, considering our argument. And then we need to apply it. not just to the paper, but to our thinking, right? We need to consider why information is useful to us in this moment, and then we need to figure out how to use it for ourselves in our writing. And of course, by writing that paper, we are sharing. And we need to share that information ethically, meaning we shouldn't be repeating bad information. We shouldn't knowingly take fake news or information that is subject to suspicion, if it's accurate or if it's even true. We shouldn't be sharing that. So there is a way for us to really consider how we use information. And we can use this information literacy cycle to consider that. I love how slow my machine is. I have a suspicion that it's the combination and a very slow internet. So forgive me for that. We are going to move to the next slide. Information overload. It is possible to feel like we don't know how to get the information we really need. In fact, I teach an academic writing class, and one of the questions that I received from a student was this very question: how do I know what resources I should use? Yeah, well, if there's a lot of information out there, it can feel like, where do I start? And then on top of that, there is misinformation, which is different from disinformation. So misinformation, as you can see here, is just inaccurate information that gets spread unintentionally. But then we also have the problem of disinformation, which is intentional spread of bad information. And so we have all of that to contend with when we need to get something to use for ourselves and others. And of course, we have filter bubbles, right? Isolated information ecosystems that reinforce certain kinds of belief systems. So if you're in a group of people who don't like certain foods, and you just, what is that expression, tomato, you're in the tomato group, and you absolutely don't want to be in the tomato group because they're all wrong. It's really not about food, it's more about pronunciation. But we get into our ecosystems, right? Our groups where we believe one thing is true, and we don't want to think that the other thing can also be true, or it cannot exist or coexist with our beliefs. Well, this is all part of the challenge that we have with information. So what should we do about it? Or what can we do about it? What is available to us as consumers of information, and perhaps even creators of information? Well, before we get to that, why don't you all take, let's say, 3 minutes again to take this mini quiz. It's a basic concepts check. You can write your answers in the chat, please, so that we can see whether or not you're following along. Take the quiz. Answer questions 1, 2, and 3. So what is the primary goal of information literacy? How does information literacy differ from digital literacy? And then name one step in the information literacy cycle. Name the step that probably means the most to you for where you are right now in your professional life. So take 3 minutes to do that. And hopefully, Mr. Lin and Chang, we will get some responses in the chat box. Any responses yet?
Not yet.
Oh, well, come on, everyone. Remember, you add value by responding. So I'm hoping to get some responses to this quiz in the chat box. Any responses yet?
There is one response from the chat box. Can you see the chat box?
I cannot. All I can see
Okay,
is my
so
own
I read it
presentation.
now.
I'm sorry.
The primary goal of information literacy is to equip individuals with the ability to recognize when information is needed and to effectively locate, evaluate, and use that information ethically and responsibly. It's emphasized critical thinking and problem-solving skills in the context of information seeking and decision-making. Thank you for Lê Ngọc Phương Trần for your comments on the chat box. Another one from Mai Nguyen, identify and evaluate information. And from Mi Trần Lê Hoàng, seek, evaluate, use, and create.
Wonderful. What about naming a step in the information literacy cycle? Do we have any responses to that question?
Okay, to the question about the difference between information literacy and digital literacy, Lê Ngọc Phương Trang have some comments. Information literacy focuses on the broader process of identifying, evaluating, and using information, regardless of the format, like print or digital or oral. While digital literacy, on the other hand, specifically pertains to the ability to use digital tools, technologies, and platforms effectively and responsibly. It includes skills like navigating software, understanding digital security, and using online communication tools. Thank you for your feedback. And there's one from Kai David Atinza. I'm sorry if my pronunciation is incorrect. One is primary goal is to discern real or fake information. Two, information literacy is a skill to discern real from fake information, while digital literacy is the fluency in the use of digital platforms. Yeah, we have a lot of feedback from Long Lê Thái Hoàng, from Thảo Nguyễn, from many others. Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, we have quite feedback about that.
So I'm going to just take a step back to take a look at the information literacy cycle, because I want to make sure I didn't hear any responses to that. So I want to make sure that that is something that you are all familiar with, and you will be able to take something away from that. So recognize need, locate information, evaluate quality, organize the information, apply it, and share it ethically. These are the steps in the information literacy cycle that are most pertinent to you, either as researchers, especially as researchers, particularly for you as students, really important to you as teachers, because you need to impart this information to students, and to anyone who wants to use information in a way that suggests that they are thoughtful and considerate about what it does. Words information is important. So let's move on. Here is yet another QR code. So please take your phones and scan this, because this will take you to a digital and media literacy plan of action. I found this particular resource to be excellent. It is a white paper, which is basically an instructional or informational report by a woman named Renee Hobbs. It's posted in the Education Resources Information Center. It is from the U.S. Department of Education database called ERIC. And I love a lot of really great, there's so many great resources in ERIC. So I think that by the time you reach the end of this, even if you don't read the entire white paper, it's a report. So, you know, it's a few pages long. But by the time you get to the end of it, you'll see there is a great list of successful global digital and media literacy programs. I really just appreciate that about this white paper. It doesn't just tell you, it shows you. And it could be a great resource for you in your situation. So go ahead and download that using your QR code, using your phone and this QR code. If you wouldn't mind, give us a thumbs up once you've gotten the document. So in the chat box, which I can't see, if you wouldn't mind, just give a thumbs up when you have actually acquired this document.
I
Do we have
see
any
some
thumbs up yet?
comments. Yeah, some thumbs up in the chat box. Some said that they have downloaded. Thank you, Kai, Noen, PR, for your feedback. And there is very interesting comments from Mai Nguyen. Choose the right news to share and know which the wrong news is. That is the good comments from Mai Nguyen to the earlier questions. Yeah.
Yep. Wonderful. Thank you for that. I appreciate that follow through. We have basically reached the end of Module 1. And in this time that we have, would you ask me questions? I hope that I will be able to answer them. And of course, if I can't in this moment, I will definitely find ways to get you the answers that you want or need. But put your questions or comments in the chat box. And then after a few minutes, we will move on to Module 2.
Yeah, a lot of thank you messages from the participants for sharing that resources from American Center. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any questions?
Not yet.
Okay, let's give it one more minute and then we'll move on.
One person said, kindly reshare the QR code.
Ah, okay, let me go back. It's going to take a second.
Yes.
There's a delay.
And while waiting for you to reshare the QR code, there is one question from Kyle. This question is a bit contextualized. How can I, as a program specialist in the Department of Education, the Philippines, help embed information literacy in our curriculum?
Help combat information?
Yes.
Is the word combat, C-O-M-B-A-T?
Yeah, embed information literacy in our curriculum. Yeah.
Oh, embed. Well, so as we move on in this webinar, there will be some very specific professional development resources. So one of the ways that you can embed digital literacy, information literacy, media literacy into your curriculum is through professional learning networks. These are invaluable. Any kind of learning community is going to have more power than a single person. So it's really important that you understand that your job as the person who asking the question, your job is to consider how you can start to develop professional learning networks or communities of practice that can get together and form the basis for change or revision in your local context, curriculum in your local context. Since I don't know much about the Philippines and any kind of structural decision making, I would say let's keep going. Listen for when we get to those learning communities and think about what those could mean to you. I hope that answers your question for now.
Yes, he says nice. They do this now in Department of Education Philippines through their school learning action cell. They create professional networks within and outside their schools, and that's great about the Philippines context.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I'm happy to hear that. And I'm glad we are able to move on to module 2, because I hope that it will we'll pick up some momentum, and some of the things that you're thinking about and asking about will be addressed here also. So in this module, we're talking about practical application in academic settings. So here we are. We've arrived. So think about who you are. Remember, we took that poll earlier. Are you a student? Are you an educator? Are you a researcher? Are you a designer or an administrator? What is your basic role? And think about your basic role, your primary role, and think about what this means for you. So if you're a student, you're thinking about how to write papers. You're thinking about things like note-taking and how to cite your sources. If you're an educator, you're thinking about how do you design good assignments? How do you create real world thinking? That's what you should be doing, right? In the 21st century, when we're thinking about how to educate our students, we're trying to move away from those old models of traditional lectures into something that allows our students a real world experience, because frankly, they're living in the real world and they need to be able to function in it in every way possible. So designing assignments that make sense, with that in mind, scaffolding our assignments, because a lot of us are functioning in situations in which we have different levels of understanding. And I'm talking about English language instruction, of course. So in classes that I've taught and are still teaching, I have students who are, A-level speakers, all the way up to C-level speakers, but in the same class. And so how do I scaffold the assignments so that everyone gets something out of it? Everyone is able to hopefully uniquely demonstrate their skill level and their knowledge. This is really important because you don't want to leave anyone out. You don't want accessibility to education and information to become problematic. You want to give everyone a chance to be able to, well, through differentiated instruction, you want to give everyone a chance to be able to show what they know. And of course, as educators, your responsibility is to collaborate with other educators. That's also something that you can be doing to apply your practical knowledge. And finally, for researchers, you're thinking about how do you review literature? How do you manage data? And where do you publish? Well, look at the tools. Each of these sets of people, students, educators, and researchers, I have put some tools on the screen that can be useful to you. Please, in the chat, it's a kind of way of raising your hand. Put the name of a tool that you use. If it's one of these, great. If it's a totally different tool, also great, because then others get the benefit of your experience. So please take a moment now. I'm going to give you about a minute and a half to type in tools that you use for your particular context, whether you're a student, an educator, or a researcher, or someone else. Do that now for me, please. And please, Mr. Lin, once you start to see responses, please let me know what they are.
I comment that he had some tool like Grammarly, Canva for education, Mentimeter, Hà Anh AS staff also talk about Meet. Yeah, these are good tools, right?
Sure. What was that last one?
Meet, MEET, GEET,
Oh,
yeah. And
okay. Oh, I think if that sounds new to
no,
me,
and
so that sounds
that we use
interesting.
Qbot for my research and Canva for Google Scholar. Canva,
Yeah.
Grammarly, Perplexity, Rossi AI, Brisk, Cloud, Gemi,
Oh, Brisk.
Google Apps, Mendeley, ChatGPT,
Yep.
Notebook, KLM, Gemini. Yeah, that's quite a lot.
Quite a lot. KLM, was it KLM or KOM? I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Notebook, KLM. This is from.
Okay.
Sorry, I cannot read your name. There's also one about spreadsheet. Zotero and Google Scholar. Yeah, I love Zotero. Zotero, good for literature review, for deep research. ChatGPT and DeepSeek for general use. Euclid, Booklet, Kahoot, Canva for teaching. So for different purposes, we have different tools, right?
Yes, of course. No, I love this. Okay, so just so you know, and this goes back to that excellent question about, how do I embed, information literacy into my local context? Well, we here have created a learning community. So by being here together and by sharing our knowledge and resources, we are actually helping each other to develop professionally or educationally if you're a student. So this is great. I'm actually pretty happy. And I hope that those of you who aren't familiar with some of the tools that are mentioned, that you're taking note of those. Write those down. So when we are needing to do a research paper or we're needing to do research for some purpose or other, we do have a kind of process that we need to go through. So we need to know what our topic is. In some cases, a topic is given to you by your instructor or your program. Other times, you're able to choose for yourself based on your interests or based on, what your discipline is, where you're going with your education. Either way, you need to do background research. You need to know exactly what kind of information is necessary to you if you're going to go forward. Then you need to focus. So you find specific and relevant sources, whether that's through an actual library, an analog library where you walk up to a shelf and you pull out a book, or if you're going to do that kind of research online through databases, for instance, eLibrary USA, or any other kind of open educational resources. And then finally, you're going to need to synthesize. Oh boy, that is such a great word. Synthesize. Boy, I tell you. Synthesize that information and combine it with other information that you've pulled together and you need to use it to argue your point or to make your point. Having this process to go through is helping you focus on the kinds of information, the kinds of digital tools you use, and the media that is essential for you in that moment. So even though there is such a thing as information overload, you have something that helps you to focus. And often it's an assignment. Often it's a specific idea that you are trying to prove or you are trying to argue. So knowing that, it helps you to sort of weed out some of the noise, hopefully. In this research process, sorry, trying to get to the next slide, always takes a minute. Oh, while I'm waiting for the technology, okay. So anytime there is a question or a comment, please don't hesitate to stop or jump in. And in this research process, you have to consider how you're going to use that information in an objective and practical way. How will you take notes on the information that you are receiving, that you are acquiring? Are you going to use a very conventional method, like the Cornell method that you see here on the screen? Or are you a more creative thinker, someone who doesn't need that particular structure, but you just need to make sure that your ideas connect? Well, you can try mind mapping, visual representation of ideas. Either way, you're going to need to be able to use that information. So how do you get it? I heard some of you, when we talked about tools that you use, mention Mendeley. Great. I think I might have even heard somebody using EndNote. I definitely heard Perplexity. And I may have heard somebody say they use Zotero. I could be wrong about that. Maybe we could review the tools, Mr. Lin, and see how many people or how many mentions some of these tools were getting. Have I lost you? Hello?
Yes, actually, participants all mentioned the tools that you are sharing on the screen. Please go ahead.
Okay, great. Okay, so since I can, I'm sorry, since I can't see the main screen, the webinar screen, when it's quiet, I don't know what's happening. I don't know if my connection has been lost or anything. So it's really helpful to me to hear you talking. Great. All right, so all of these tools were mentioned. This is great. By the way, even though they say open source, some of these you do have to, they have a cost. So you have to do a cost benefit analysis. You have to decide, how important is it to me to have this tool? And if you need a level of access that requires payment, you got to consider that. Not everything is free. Perplexity is wonderful, but even Perplexity can be paid for after you've used it for a long time, or if you want a level of access. So you do need to consider that. So for those of you who use Mendeley or EndNote, what are the benefits to you? Or even Perplexity or Zotero. I just remember hearing Mendeley and EndNote. So what are the benefits to you? Can you write that in the chat for me, and then I can hear from Mr. Lin?
Okay, again, Melita wants participants to share some benefits about the tools that you use. It can be Zotero, sorry, Perplexity or Mendeley, any tools that you are using.
And tell me if you're paying for those tools or if you're using the free versions.
Mai Nguyen share that facilitate information, organize information well. Me too. I agree that Zotero, I use Zotero for my research. It's helped me to, it's very good for a literature review. We can manage the resources from Google Scholars, put everything in the Zotero, and they help us to write down in the references. That's really good.
Oh, that's wonderful. Are you using a free version or a version you need to pay for? Okay, great. That's wonderful. So for me, I advocate for the use of free tools. I do know that there are times when, if you're using something a lot and your free access runs out, you have to consider whether or not you want to pay for it. But for the most part, I'm glad that it's accessible to you and it's not something you have to pay for.
Okay, Rosemary says that she used Mendeley for free for organizing her related literature in research. It facilitates note-taking as well.
Wonderful.
Fellamar said I actually did not use Mendeley. I only use Perplexity, which is very helpful in summarizing the points of the text that I am running. I use it for free. However, there's a limit in using. Thanh Phạm from Vietnam said that Mendeley provide free access to research papers, journals in years. Yes, so there are lots of experience about these tools. Tung Quân said that he uses Zotero Mendeley for automatic citation, alphabetical sorting, and flexibility to change citation formats.
Oh, that's wonderful. Wow. Okay. So the reason why I asked you that is because there are people who are in our webinar who don't necessarily know. I know the law of averages. There are people who don't know how to use these tools or what they would potentially use them for. So again, you add value by giving these responses. And now the people who were worried about how would I use that now have a basis for considering how to use that. So thank you for those responses. It's very helpful.
Oh, there's one comment. This is the tools that we've never heard before. The Turnitin from Rosemary. She's using Turnitin as well. It's paid for by her university. She uses in proofreading undergraduate thesis. Wow, that's interesting. I've never heard of Turnitin before.
Really, Turnitin has been around for a while, and it is quite a tool. I think Yes, go ahead, Mr. Lin.
Yeah, this is for plagiarism check. My colleagues share about the purpose of using. It's free too. Thank you, my colleagues, for sharing this this tool.
Yes, I love it. Yes, we are a true learning community. I'm grateful for that. I actually really I like Turnitin. All of these apps to some degree, or platforms to some degree, will have limitations. So you'll have to figure out how to use them, when to use them, what to use them for. We do know now there is some controversy over AI checkers. When you run a paper through to see how much of the text has been written by AI. Sometimes this is problematic because it's, contextual. There are those of us who are language learners who may speak or write in a certain way. And it may seem, because of our language level and our ability to communicate, we communicate maybe more simplistically in a second language. It may seem that that has been written by AI, when in fact it hasn't. So this is the controversy with tools like Turnitin. We have to think about how to use them, and we have to think about whether to use them and under what circumstances. This is all a part of the growth process when we're learning about digital literacy. That's just the world that we live in. We have to figure out how to use digital tools and whether they are right for us. So take a look at this page, this student research journey. This may be familiar to most of you. When you're thinking about how to produce something, you don't do it automatically. It's not like jumping on a flying carpet and arriving at point B from point A. No such luck. We have work to do. So we are assigned a topic. We select a topic. We do initial research. We gather sources and think about whether or not they are useful to us. And we start to draft our ideas. There are different ways to do that. And after we've drafted and gotten maybe some peer review and feedback, we start to write our final paper. Within this process, so between week 5 and week 7 especially, peer review, rubrics, understanding what is expected of us in the outcome of our paper can help us to really refine how we use information and how we write about it. This student research journey is daunting. I'm not going to lie, we all know it. We've all had to write something, and we've all had to write something that integrated research into that writing. Well, because of that, we need to be able to feel maybe just a tiny bit less stressed when we go through this process. Knowing, again, how to use information, where to get it, and what it means is really important. I love how slow this is. All right, here we go. So we need to think about the design of information literacy. Kinds of research we should use it, etc. Higher order thinking, right? Getting information. That's almost like a kind of practical or very fundamental action to take. Anyone can get information. When we start to think about how to use it, we're beginning a process of analysis. And then as we analyze that information for use, we need to start thinking about how to integrate it into our own ideas. Well, that's synthesis. So all of this is moving us through some higher order thinking. You would take the information, break it into manageable steps, start to analyze information, and here it says information quality. You need to combine multiple sources. We almost never, when we do research or write papers, we almost never use one source. First of all, that's not ethical, right? We need to be able to balance ideas, and the only way to do that is to have more than one source. And then we need to reflect on it. So tell me in the chat, how many of you in your writing or research journey have trouble with one of these steps? Which step is it, and why is it difficult for you? Can you give me some idea? Take a look at this slide and just briefly in the chat, say which one of these steps gives you the most concern. Any responses yet?
Yes, there's one from Nhật Minh. I think source of evaluation is quite hard for novice researchers. We can't say for sure which one is credible or which one has been disputed.
Okay. Definitely a source of stress. Definitely some frustration for all of us. We have to consider whether this source is useful.
And Linda
Okay.
shared
Any
that
other?
she has concerns about reflection. She rarely does it. Mai Nguyễn agreed with that reflection, as she did reflect, but then she did not know what to do next. For Rosemary, she said that source evaluation is nerve-wracking for her, I'm sorry. And Nhật Minh, or maybe synthesis, she always got feedback on how I list things instead of truly mix them. Yes, interesting feedback from her. From him,
Okay,
sorry.
wow. That's great feedback. So let's take a minute to talk about source evaluation, just a minute. Being able to analyze source quality is not something that happens overnight. We actually have to practice that. And in the next few slides, there is a QR code for a document called Source Detective. This resource, I hope, will help you along the road to thinking about how to evaluate sources. So I do have, I would love to, we have an expression, there's an app for that. Well, there's no app necessarily, but there's a QR code for that. So we are getting to that in a second. And I hope that you can use this resource to help you to refine your evaluation process. You can use it as a kind of template and then modify it as you go along in your own context. But it's a good place to start. So that you should look out for. It's coming up. The synthesis tasks, being able to not just list your ideas based on sources that you got, but figuring out how to put them together to create an argument. That's also challenging, but you do that constantly. If you have friends that you go out to dinner with or you spend time with, your friends are often chattering about something. Let's say you're talking about pizza or specifically what you should have for dinner, right? Somebody says, I want pizza. No, I was really hoping we'd get sushi. You are constantly evaluating different sources of information and in trying to inject your own ideas. Well, okay, maybe we can get, shrimp pizza. It's not sushi. It's not, specifically, cheese pizza. It is this amalgamation of these two things. Now, that's a very simplistic idea about or example of how to put ideas together, but it's what you do all the time. You're just doing it in a very focused way when you're talking about your research. You're always thinking about how to synthesize information. Mom says this, dad says this, or your brother says this, and your sister says this, and you're trying to figure out how to make it work, right? We constantly have that tension in our lives. We have the ability to take multiple sources and think about what are the main ideas across these sources? What are the key words across these sources? What are the ideas that are similar, maybe not exactly the same, but similar across these sources? Okay, so this source says tomatoes are fruit. This source says tomatoes are fruit. This source says tomatoes are vegetables. Okay, I don't leave out the source that says tomatoes are vegetables, even though they're wrong. I include that as an outlier and say the two sources that say tomatoes are fruit use these characteristics to show why. And this one says those characteristics don't matter. You still synthesize that information into your argument, even though it is an outlier, because you want to show the variety of the way people think about a topic. I don't know if that example is helpful or not, but I do know that the act of taking information from multiple sources and trying to create new ideas is not new to us. We do it all the time. And this idea about reflection, it really is challenging to think about, okay, I've gotten to the end of this research process. What do I do with that? Well, hopefully you're thinking about practical ways to use that information or ways to promote that information in other areas of your life. I always tell my students, and it is always true, that nothing is wasted. You might get to the end of a research project and think, okay, I'm just done. There's no reflection necessary. But I guarantee you, maybe not in that moment, but at some point, you will use that information. It will come back to you, kind of like a ghost. You will be able to figure out how to reflect on it. It may not happen immediately. So be kind to yourself. Be patient with the process. It's not always going to happen right away. We're moving now to the next slide. And, okay. Here it is, Source Detective. Go ahead, take your smartphone, scan this QR code, and give a thumbs up in the chat when you've gotten it. Do we have any thumbs up yet? Do we have any thumbs up yet? Do we have any participants who have downloaded the resource?
Yes. Good comments from the participants. A lot of thumbs up. Good.
Okay. Wonderful. All right, I'm going to give you another 30 seconds and then we'll move on from this page. I do believe that this webinar will be available, so you will be able to come after we're finished. And I do believe you'll be able to come back to any one of the QR codes later if you need to. So about 20 more seconds and then we will move on. Okay, so this is where we return to the idea of higher order thinking. Basic skills that we use are finding and email. And when we start consider what the immediate skills, evaluation, organization. And then as we start to synthesize and do a critical analysis of that information, we're using advanced skills. This is important because I think often we just sort of think of research as, oh, I have to do this, but we don't know what advantages that we're getting from it. Well, these are the advantages. So how do we include other people in helping us with this higher order thinking? We always get help, can get help We always have access to help. And being able to collaborate with information specialists, with librarians, this is important. So in your classes, if you are educators, consider inviting people to give guest lectures or attend one yourself. And if you are a student, you can get tutoring. That's a research consultation. And if you're an educator or a researcher, you have the ability to be that consultant for someone else. And of course, curate the information that you get. Curation is what museum staff do when they get collections or exhibits. They think about how to thematically lay out those exhibits and those pieces in a way that tells a story. Well, that's what curation is. How does your research, how do your resources tell a story? And finally, work together with someone, if at all possible, particularly researchers and educators. Work together with somebody to create value for yourself and your students. Co-teach, do a workshop. It shows that you understand the knowledge and you know how to share it or spread it. I want to take a second and ask, just do a quick hands up. How many of you have had a guest lecturer either come to your class if you're a student, or come to your class if you're an educator, or you were the guest lecturer? Just a show of hands in the chat.
Thank you for some of you for raising your hands. Thank you, Choi, for saying okay. Rosemary, raise hand.
So let's take a quick step forward. I'm going to tell you an example of how I used a guest lecturer, and I would love it if you would very, very briefly tell me what the benefit was to you. Years ago, when I was a graduate teaching associate, I assigned my students an evaluation essay. And what they had to evaluate was they had to go to the local courthouse, Alameda County Courthouse, and they had to sit in on a case. Now, I don't know about here in Vietnam or where you are in the world, whether it's Malaysia or Indonesia or the Philippines, wherever you are. But in the United States, court cases are public. So I sent my students to the Alameda County Courthouse to sit in on a case. Didn't matter what case. And to evaluate the situation. How did things go? Was it like they see on TV, you know, these exciting court cases where the gavel comes down and the judge says, be quiet? And what is that like in reality? I wanted them to evaluate that, to feel what it was like to be in a real courtroom. And because I am the sort of teacher who doesn't assign work that I won't do myself, I also did the assignment. When I went to the courthouse, the judge, after the case was finished or after their session was finished, the judge asked me, who was I? And I said I was a teacher. He invited me back to his chambers and he told me what his philosophy of adjudicating was. He believed in an idea that expresses that people should come together and talk out their differences. And I said, well, that's unique. That's a unique way of thinking about how to process people who come through your courtroom. So I asked him, would you come to my class and talk to my class about that idea? And he did. I had a real judge from a real courthouse come to my class and talk to my students. My students were informed ahead of time, and they had to have at least 3 questions, and I had to look over those questions before they could ask them. But they had to have at least 3 questions written down and ask one. I mean, they could ask more than one if they wanted to, but they had to ask at least one. And so we got a lot of really great ideas, and the flow of information was useful to us because I had this expert who came to my class and talked about case law, how to get people to talk to each other rather than just, you know, put them in jail. It was great. It was a really fundamental lesson for my students. So what about you? How have you used...
Linda also shared that she got this experience in her class in her current university in Malaysia. The lecturer wanted to bring them a new way of learning and new perspective from the guest lecturer. Rosemary also shared she's from the Philippines, and she had a chance to teach Malaysian students in Tunku Abdul Rahman University of Management and Technology last 2024 for a period of 2 weeks. This was a part of her participation in a faculty of exchange program.
Wow.
Yes, and you know, guest lecturers happen to me quite often when I studied in Hawaii, when my professor invited guests to the class, and you know, I had great experience learning with the guests, especially in leadership classes.
Oh, that's awesome. That's what I wanted to hear. And I think that that is an untapped resource, or it is a resource that you should really, truly consider. And on both sides, even being the lecturer. So if you get invited to do something like that, take the opportunity. You can't imagine how rich and enriching it is. All right, let's move on. And thank you for those responses. I appreciate that very much. You might have heard me mention rubrics a little bit earlier. Well, here is an example assessment rubric. And this answers the question of, how do I know which sources to use? How do I decide the quality of sources? Well, take a look at this rubric and potentially use it. So if a source is excellent, it's going to be a scholarly source, meaning it's going to probably come from a peer-reviewed journal. And conversely, if the source has no synthesis of ideas, no sources, was, you know, made by some random person on the internet, it's probably not going to be a source you want to use. You always want to be in the good to excellent sweet spot. So take a look at this rubric and think about how it can be useful to you. Same with literature review. Show of hands, how many of you have to do literature review in your work? I can't see your hands, by the way. So if you are raising your hand in the chat, let me know.
Always. Some people said always, because like Kai says always, because he has to prepare programs for teachers and school leaders. And for those who do research, literature review is something, you know, very basic from the very first step.
Ah, okay. Well, that's good to know, actually.
Thanh Phạm has
Wonderful.
come up.
All right.
Linda also share about literature review. Okay, so there are some feedback on the chat box.
Oh, that's wonderful. All right. Well, great. So we're running out of time for module 2. So I don't want to rush us through this, but if there's something specific about literature review that you want to share with the group, put it in the chat. All of these best practices, by the way, are going to be simple higher order thinking, organization, collection, organizing that, because that's how we should consider using information. So data management basics, same thing: plan, collect, organize, store, and share ethically, always ethically. Think about who needs that information and maybe who doesn't, or how do they need that information. That's important. So digital literacy has a lot to do with how we share information. And open access publishing. A quick show of hands, how many of you have published in a journal or published in an open resource platform? So just a show of hands. And while you're doing that, gold open access publishing is basically when the publisher publishes something in an open access journal. Green open access publishing is when an author publishes their material. It's not immediately available because it is usually only available for a small fee. So the difference is the publisher publishes immediately accessible information in an open educational resource, or the author publishes for a small fee in a journal or some other platform. So how many of you have published? If nobody, that's okay. I'm just trying to find out who is in our group today. Any publishers? None?
Okay, go ahead and share. I have not seen any feedback from participants.
Okay. All right. Well, so now we've arrived at our second interactive poll. Take a look at this QR code and answer the questions. Which information literacy challenge is the most difficult for you? And so when we talk about challenges, we're talking about finding sources, evaluating the quality, organizing that information, and citing it correctly. So which one of those challenges do you find the most difficult? Go ahead and answer the poll. I will take a look at the responses on my other laptop over here, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon. I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to do that. Great. We've got some responses already. Oh, it seems, sorry, this cough seems to be getting worse. It seems that evaluating quality is one of the most challenging of the information literacy steps. But organizing information is up there too, and a couple of finding resources or finding sources, but primarily evaluating the quality. I hope that that source detective resource that was posted earlier is going to be helpful to you, really, because being able to evaluate sources is, I won't say it's not difficult, of course, it's challenging, obviously, but it becomes sort of second nature the more you do it. All All right. Well, I think we can move on. For those of you who want to add to the poll, please feel free. It looks like there are just about 21 new, so about 30 responses. That's great. That's a good number of people who've shared their thoughts. We're getting close to the end of module 2 and our first break, but I think we still have one more. We have an activity. Yeah. So just before the break, we have an activity that requires you to leave the webinar, sort of leave it. You're not leaving. You're going to step outside of it very briefly and work on this activity. When you're done with the activity, just do a quick report back in the chat. Now, if you don't feel like you want to do this now, you can do it during our break. And the activity is asking you to consider an information literacy issue in your context, then suggest a practical way to address it in your context, and then report back to the group. So take a look at this QR code, open it, and you can start now and work through the break if you like, or take your break. But I would love to get some reports back from participants on how you would address. This is really important, right? Don't always look at a problem as a problem. Look at it as a potential challenge with a solution, light at the end of the tunnel, right? Think about how you would address it. Can I just get any quick comments or questions that may have come up in the chat, Mr. Lin?
In the chat, just Pawn said that she has one published in journal. Angelitan, maybe she comments about your earlier questions, finding resources. Maybe that's one of the most challenging tasks in research. And that's it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, scan this QR code. It takes you to a Google form. In fact, you can see a kind of preview of that Google form right here at the top of the slide, and start to respond to that. You can do that at any time, by the way, and we can take a look at the responses, and hopefully there'll be a way for me to get the responses back to you so you can see what other people have said, how they have met the challenge of information literacy in their context.
Yes, some participants agree about finding resources. Some comments as they've done. So this is you said that this is the break time, right?
Yep. So if there are no questions, we can move to our first break.
How many minutes for the break?
Take 7 minutes, please.
Okay, 7 minutes. Perfect. So, ladies and gentlemen, please take a break for 7 minutes. Please stay connected, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think we're back now. It just occurred to me that with some of our interactive features for the webinar, we are going to be behind time. Well, I don't want that for us, so I'm going to move rather quickly through modules 3 and 4. I do actually want to spend a little bit more time in module 5 if we can, so let's move through these quickly. So tools for staying updated on information trends. We've got RSS readers. RSS stands for really simple syndication. And you can get an RSS reader through the app store on your phone. Now, I don't know if you have an iPhone or if you have an Android, but easy to get these tools. RSS readers are platforms that aggregate different kinds of news stories. So you choose which reader you want. I actually have one called Aggregator News. That's the app that I have. And I can choose business, technology, education. In fact, those are the top feeds I would suggest if you decide to go to your app store and get an RSS reader. Because if you want to understand what's happening in the world with regard to technology, education, and business, those are going to be the topics that are going to be most useful to you. So we also have things like Google Scholar, and I heard that earlier. Some of you are using Google Scholar pretty regularly. That's wonderful. You can also get alerts on new articles published in journals. So you're using technology, what you need. Updated information on ideas that are very specific to you or to your context. Getting alerts sent to you by your phone, great. You can also cancel them anytime. Whenever they become overwhelming, you don't have to create a situation for yourself where you're feeling overwhelmed. You can stop them. ResearchGate and academia.edu are also really great ways for you to get updated on information that might be useful to you in your context. I know I'm going through these quickly, but don't worry, the webinar will be available to you after we're finished. So anything that you want to know more about, you'll be able to review. Pardon me. Thank you all for your patience with my coughing too. I appreciate it. And also curating. We talked about curating sources before. So identify your needs, select sources, organize the content. You can put them in folders on your phone. You can bookmark them. You can review them regularly to decide whether they are still relevant to you and weed out the ones that are not. And you can curate by updating your collection of sources. I don't know why I like the word curate. I'm sorry, I just have to stop for a second. Curating just sounds so cool. So I hope that you're all thinking about how to curate the information that you need in your particular context. Creating subject-specific resource collections. So going to journals that are useful to you. eLibrary USA has Academic Search Premier, JSTOR. They have Press Reader. They have Bookflix and Canopy, which is great for videos. So many really great things available through eLibrary USA. For those of you who are attached to an American space, whether it's an American Center or an American Corner or an American Hangout, you will have access, or you can have access to eLibrary USA, which is a wonderful place if you need credible sources that you can feel good about, that sort of take the guesswork out of whether or not they're credible. They're mostly peer-reviewed journals, which is why I recommend eLibrary USA. Key journals, databases, expert blogs. Not anybody can write a blog. I mean, anybody can write a blog. I wrote one. But expert blogs, people you know to be industry specific creators and mentors, people who you would trust the information that they put out, and professional associations. You can collect your these resources in your web browser through bookmarking. So I love this. Let's just pronounce this crop, if you don't mind. Evaluating source reliability through the crop test. Okay, so currency. When was the information published or updated? So when we say currency, we're talking about timing. Was it 10 years ago? Things have changed, right? So consider the timing of the publishing of a resource. Relevance. Does it fit your needs? If it doesn't, okay, well, that answers that question. Authority. Who's the author or publisher? Is it just some average person on the internet, or does it come from a professional association or a journal, as we talked about? Accuracy. Is the information supported by evidence? Often we know that through the sources that are listed at the end of the article or at the end of the piece of writing. And then finally, purpose. Why is it there? Why does it exist? Is it peer-reviewed journal articles that are talking about something that either over time or over cultures or for some reason is relevant to a group of people and their needs? Finding out what the purpose is also important. So the CRAP test, C-R-A-A-P. I think actually using this as your baseline for deciding whether a source is reliable or not, you're going to stress about the reliability of sources. The CROP test is very useful to you. So collaborative information sharing, something I mentioned earlier, and this is going to be something we talk about. Joining communities of practice or professional learning networks. Everybody else do all the talking. Engage in discussions. Share resources so that everybody can sort of share minds. You've heard that expression, mind share. Well, yeah, be a part of that. And then collaborate on projects as a way to actively show that you're learning. Pardon me. So very specifically, I want to just show you this as an example. Communities of practice are incredibly useful, incredibly resourceful places for you. To go back to one of the earlier questions from the scholar in the Philippines, yeah, do this. Form a community of practice. And if you already have them, great, participate in them actively. I show a screenshot of what happened in my community of practice among fellows. There are fellows not just in Vietnam, but in countries around the world. And this particular fellow is, I believe, somewhere in Europe. And I posted something about my academic writing workshop, and I walked through the steps of what I did with the students. And another person in the community of practice said, "Thank you for that. I'm going to steal this idea from you and use it." But it wouldn't have been useful to her if I hadn't explained my process, my methodology. How did I walk the students through that academic writing process? And that's what she found useful. So think about not just participating, but participating with value. And I also, by the way, I benefit from others who post in our community of practice. I love it. I get a lot of great ideas. So here's also something you can do. Create professional learning networks. And don't think about creating them just locally. You can create them across cultures. Get involved in a webinar like this, meet people through the chat, network, and then hopefully you can create a cross-cultural professional learning network. So connect, engage, contribute, and grow. The difference between a professional learning network and a community of practice is basically just the people involved. So a community of practice is going to be sort of a closed network. A professional learning network is going to be more of an open network, right? People who come from different places or from different situations that are going to join in order to provide you informational value. Communities of practice are pretty closed. So my community of practice is open only to fellows in this US State Department program. And when you join networks, figure out which ones make the most sense for you. So choose a platform, create a profile, find people who are going to, I think, again, add value, contribute something to your research or your teaching or whatever. Or you can contribute something to them. Don't always think in terms of what you need. Think of in terms of what you can provide. And then engage. There's no point in joining a network and collaborating if you don't actually do it. So make sure that you actively participate. I know I'm going through this quickly. If there are questions, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat. At any time, I can be stopped, and I'm happy to answer questions. So from joining a network, and actually, let's take a second. I'm going to go to the next slide, but I still want to ask the question. How many of you are a part of or have joined a collaborative organization? Just put a show of hands in the chat for me, please. Any responses?
Not yet, Melita. We are waiting for the responses.
Okay. So just let me repeat, I'm looking for a show of hands for those of you who have joined professional learning networks, communities of practice, or any other collaborative organization. You just need to show your hands. You don't have to say what it is. If you don't want to, you can do that as well. Okay, well,
we have one participant saying that she used to take part before, and Miss Linda saying that she's joining many communities of practice in Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia.
Wonderful. Great. Well, and I hope they're working for you. I hope that it is a mutually beneficial collaboration. So we have a mini quiz. We don't have to take this quiz. It's just a way for you to stay in touch with the information and make sure that we're all on the same page. So the first question is asking you, what is the primary purpose of an RSS reader? If you know the answer, great. You can drop that in the chat. Question number 2, how can Google Scholar Alerts benefit researchers? Again, if you have an idea or an answer, drop it in the chat. And for question number 3, Name one advantage of joining a professional learning network. And that goes for communities of practice as well. If you know of an advantage, again, drop it in the chat. Great. And we can move on.
While waiting for the participants to answer your questions, I want to share my personal use of Google Scholar Alerts. I choose a topic from Google Scholar, and then I register so that it can send to my email whenever they have the updated articles related to the topic that I'm interested in. So I think that's a good way for me to keep updated with the topic I really want to have the information about.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that is the way we need to use it if we are going to continue to learn and understand what's relevant. I mean, the 21st century is exciting, but we've got a lot that comes at us. So being able to updated information, current information, so that we have an idea of how to keep up, that's useful.
Yeah.
So any questions before we leave module 3?
Yeah, we have some comments from the participants. Rosemary, she said that she participated in teachers' research before, where the teachers mentor other teachers' researchers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. In which country, Rosemary?
I guess she's from the Philippines. Is that right, Rosemary?
Okay.
Yeah. And
okay, great.
He said that he used Google Scholar because it can notify researchers about new studies in their field. Is right. It's correct, right? We have another participant, Mark Fron. Sorry for my pronunciation of your name. The participant said that in his doctoral research, he followed researchers on Google Scholar to keep abreast with new research, cited research from these articles. And he thinks this is a good way to be in the field. Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, all of those are, and thank you for putting your responses in the chat for others to see. Because again, if there are those of us in the webinar who are unfamiliar with how to use these resources or what good they might be to us, what benefit they might have, knowing what benefit they are to others who are just like you is going to be helpful. All right, we're in module 4. Again, we're going to breeze through this. We've got a lot to cover, but I think that as you review this later, it can be useful to you. So integrating information literacy into teaching and learning. I think this is going to be interesting to most of you. You can do that through instructional design, your teaching strategies, and your assessment approaches. But how, I think, is probably the question. So let's go into this more in depth. So you've all heard of the SMART goals, right? Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound, or timely. You can apply that in the same way to information literacy and learning outcomes. So think about the skill you want your students to develop, or you want to develop if you are a student or educator. Think about the action verbs that can be assessed. And think about the realistic goals for the level of the course. Now remember, most of us are differentiating instruction because we don't have students who are all at the same level. And you're going to have to think about what that means in your particular teaching context. How are you going to set realistic goals for the different students' needs in your classrooms? And connect to course content through, applications. different applications. Some of you might be using an LMS, a learning management system. Some of you might be doing more traditional types of teaching, but all of these goals can be used in service of whatever methodology you're using. Remember, we're trying to reach that kind of higher order thinking. So we're doing things like locating and accessing relevant information, analyzing and evaluating it, and then synthesizing it to create new knowledge. This is what you want your students to do. And as educators, this is what we want to do for ourselves. We have to think about progressive skill development. That's important because whatever you're doing in one course, students are doing in all of their courses. So they're taking the knowledge from what you're teaching them and applying it across all of their courses. That's how knowledge works, or at least should work. And here's the model for integration: identifying skills, mapping it back to the curriculum, designing activities that make sense for your audience or for your pupils or your students, assessing their progress, and refining your approach based on the results of that assessment. Most of this might seem like teaching 101, but it is a good reminder. Again, in the 21st century, how do we do this in the context of information, digital, and media literacy? So we have a guided inquiry approach that we can take. We can be open, curious, immerse ourselves in background knowledge, explore ideas, identify needs for research or for assignments, and then gather and organize what you need for the outcomes that you're hoping for. Again, teaching 101, it might seem simple, but good reminders in case there is some part of this that is harder for you than other parts of this. For me, I think the challenge isn't so much identifying information, but exploring it with students because it may be new to them. So one of the ways that I resolve the problem of new information with my students is through problem-based learning. I have assigned my students mock businesses, create a business. And I don't want a business that already exists. I don't want shoe companies and pizza. I want you to create, flying cars or magical bread that helps us to remember things. And that's actually 2 ideas that my students came up with. I just wanted them to be able to understand how developing ideas works. So creating problem-based learning examples for your students, giving them something to work towards, is in a real world sort of relevance is going to be important, not just for you as a teacher to think about how to create those assignments, but for your students in thinking about how to manage information in the real world. So if you've got medical students, make them diagnose someone. Obviously not a real person. Environmental policies. Think about your local context. What are the issues that are plaguing you? Maybe there's something about the oceans. Maybe there is something about air quality. Find a way to get your students into real life data, real life issues that they are actually currently dealing with, or have them create a business or market a product. These are project-based learning that gets students involved and helps you to refine your teaching. Show of hands for those of you who do problem-based teaching. Quickly, show of hands. Just throw that out there in the chat. Anyone?
Not yet. We are waiting for it.
Okay. Well, while we're waiting, there's also the flipped classroom. So there's problem-based learning. There's also flipped classroom methodology for information skills. So before the class, you show videos or you give projects to students to do. While in class, you assess those and guide them through the practice or the understanding of that thing that you ask them to do. So if you ask them to watch a video, you ask them questions about what did they see, what did they learn. If you gave them a project to do, ask them to show you what the outcomes of that project was. And finally, after the class, you get them to reflect on what they learned and think about the skills that they applied to that project or to that assignment. So flipped classroom, it's the kind of, let's think of it as the opposite of traditional learning, where all of the learning happens in the class. Well, a flipped classroom, the learning happens outside of class. And
Melita, we have the comments, a comment from Rosemary. Again, she said, we required our first year undergraduate students to make public service announcements and project proposals. And we have
sorry,
another, yeah.
Repeat that. You have a class.
Okay. Can you hear me, Melita?
Say it again, please.
Yeah.
Well, because of my sound quality problem, it's going to be important for you to repeat what you just said.
Okay. Okay. Rosemary, she said that she required her first year undergraduate students to make public service announcements and project proposals.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
By the way, Rosemary, good timing because those are authentic assessment methods. How do your students understand what I don't know specifically what the skill was you wanted them to learn, or skills plural, but giving them project proposals or public service announcements to create and then act out. That's a really great way to authentically assess their understanding. And so if you take a look here, your ability to get your students to think about their skills differently has a lot to do with your assignment design. So a PSA, for instance, is a great assignment to give your students.
We have another comment. Yeah, from Macron. He utilizes problem-based learning, even with classroom methodologies, to provide his students with tools for critical learning and what possible solutions to address and what the solutions look like.
Oh, that's wonderful. Where is that teacher or where's that educator from?
He's from the Philippines.
Okay, this is wonderful. Hey, the folks in the Philippines, good job. There's a lot going on over there. So wonderful. Research journals, annotated bibliographies, research proposals, and literature reviews are all great ways to assess, but that's kind of at the researcher level. So what I'm hearing from those of you who are posting in the chat is actually really great. That's real world learning for our students, either in K-12 or in university. By the way, my students were university students. I should probably point that out. Sorry, going to the next slide. All right. So portfolios are another way, and probably one of the best ways to understand through differentiated instruction what your students have learned. Assigning your students portfolios is really meaningful because it allows them to see a progression in their learning, where they started and where they finished. And I have to tell you, having portfolios, I have assigned portfolios for students in Comoros and in Ethiopia, and it's wonderful. It's really great. I think that if you want your students to know that they value their education, assigning a portfolio can help them do that. Peer review also helps them understand better how to understand their education. Students can often talk to each other in a way that we cannot talk to them. And it's not because we're old or, like this, it has nothing to do with that. It just has to do with they feel like they are in the same boat. We, as the teacher, are outside of the boat. And if they can talk to each other, learn how to help each other through certain assignments and the assessment of those assignments, I think that's a really valuable process for them. Peer review is pretty scary. So scaffolding that is going to be important for you as a teacher. I think if you're not doing peer review, you should be. It's an important skill for students to acquire. We are going to skip the interactive poll. I know that so you can go ahead and do this if you like and do it in the background, but we don't have time to assess the results and take a look at them. This last interactive poll asks about the teaching strategy that would work best in your context. So thinking about, let's say, guided inquiry, problem-based learning, the flipped classroom, or traditional lectures. That's what that our last interactive poll is all about. But we're going to go ahead and skip it. So if you've got your phone and you want to do it anyway, go ahead. But I'm going to move forward. And we're also going to go ahead and skip talking about this mini lesson. We're not going to skip the lesson. Go ahead and download this Google form and respond to it at your leisure after the webinar, please. This is identifying an information literacy skill that you want to explore and thinking about how to create a mini lesson around that particular information literacy skill. Now, it's not something you've already done. It's something you want to do. This is important because being able to think ahead to new skills is something that I'm hoping that you will feel more comfortable doing after having gone through this webinar. So don't choose a skill you've already done, choose a skill you'd like to acquire, and think about a mini lesson you could do that might show that your students also have acquired that particular knowledge. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I know we're moving quickly. We don't have much time left. Take a look at that Google, it is a Google form, but take a look at that QR code and work on that activity later, please. This is the end of Module 4. Any questions? No questions?
I said that he's learning a lot and he says thanks to you.
Trang, it could be something with my internet connection, but I lost you.
One participant, hi. He said he's learning a lot from the what you said. So he would like to say thanks to you. And we have
I appreciate it.
Yeah, we have another comment from Ching Love. Aside from requiring portfolio for her or him, it's important is it showcases his role, skills, and teaching experiences. It serves as proof of his competencies and is essential for graduation, license, and job applications. Beyond a requirement, it helps him reflect on his strengths and readiness to become an effective educator.
Absolutely. Sorry, I should have mentioned that, and I'm glad that I missed the name of the person who mentioned professional portfolios. But portfolios aren't just for your students. They are for you. In fact, if you don't have one, you should probably begin to develop one. Be very selective about what you include in your portfolio, but use it as a job source, right? If you are pretty sure you're going to be moving on from one institution to another, you want to be able to show, not tell. And by the way, we're in the 21st century, so your portfolio isn't necessarily something you have in your hands, right? It is stored on the cloud with different kinds of interactive learning that you've done. You can put in things like PDF documents if you like, but having photos and videos, slides, PowerPoint, or AI slides like this one, Gamma. These are the things that should be in your portfolio. Definitely, if you don't have a professional portfolio, please start thinking about developing one. All of this is not new to you, research-based arguments. This is more for researchers. This is something I wanted to include. It is something we've already discussed, but I wanted you to be able to see it. Again, not just talk about it, but also really visualize what you are trying to do as a student, an educator, a researcher, an administrator, a designer. So integrating evidence, we talked about this a little bit earlier. Somebody acknowledged that they had some trouble with this, specifically that they didn't know how to synthesize more than one source. So quoting, paraphrasing, summarizing, synthesizing. So putting ideas together. I think about how you already do that in your normal life, just in your average everyday interactions with people. You are constantly quoting other people. Hey, you know, my friend said this. What do you think? Right? You're quoting people and you're paraphrasing what they said or summarizing it, and you're trying to synthesize it with new ideas that you've acquired. You're trying to figure out what to do with information all the time. So the only difference is that in an educational or professional setting, you're trying to do that in a much more focused way. Make sure you don't shortchange yourself to say, I've never done it before, or I don't know how to do it, because you are literally doing it right now. So standing who aren't doing anything new can help less frustrated about this. So the visual flow of information from research to writing, you ask a research question, you gather your information, you analyze it, you form an argument, and then you write and revise. all very, common steps and processes that you should be familiar with. So strategies for evidence-based writing: use credible sources. Remember, Source Detective, that resource that was given to you earlier. Please use that and get in the habit of thinking about the criteria for credible sources. And it will become second nature to you the more you use it. Balance your perspectives. Remember the argument about the tomato being a fruit or a vegetable. You don't deny the person who calls a tomato a vegetable. You include that as a counter argument. So remember to include counter arguments so that your point in your argument is strengthened. I know that seems simple, or it seems like I'm trying to simplify it. I'm absolutely not. But I do think that a lot of people think that the only way you can write is to talk about your perspective. But if you don't know what the other perspective is, you can't really assure that your perspective is a good one. You have to have something to counterbalance it. Also, make sure you contextualize your data, think about its significance and relevance, and then link to an idea or a main idea called a thesis. So connect your evidence to your main argument. Identify themes, compare viewpoints, find connections, develop insights, and then, of course, hopefully from all of that, you create new understanding. I know I'm moving through this very quickly. Again, you will have this webinar to refer back to review, and you can link on any one of these necessary. I'm trying to get us you questions, and I'm really sorry about how slow my system is. It is it's a bit frustrating for me. But I also think that part of the reason for that is just my internet connection is a bit slow. While waiting for my slides to move on, are there any questions? None? No questions. Hopefully this isn't a sound issue where somebody is actually talking and I don't hear you.
We have a question, Melita. Okay, the question is, how do we foster a culture of critical inquiry and research?
Ah, lovely question. Elegant question. So my very basic response is form a community of learning. Okay, that could be a community of practice, which is a closed environment to relevant to your context, or a professional learning network, which can be open to people across cultures who can contribute to the ideas that you all share. I think this is really important in what they do. Researchers feel isolated in what they do. Once you start to join communities of practice or professional learning networks, that isolation goes away immediately. You feel isolated if there are others who are sharing ideas with you and you are engaging in really important discussions with them. I hope that answers your question. I hope it's useful. There probably are other ways, But for me, in this particular webinar, I really, really want to promote the idea of communities of learning, whether that's a professional learning network or a community of practice. And we're down to the wire. We've got about 6 minutes. So here we are, empowering your information literacy journey. Continuous learning, starting with this webinar, critical thinking, ethical practice, effective communication. Cannot be effective if it's not collaborative. You cannot talk to yourself. So if you're not a part of a professional learning network or a community of practice or some other, about joining one. You already have one in a way. I mean, if you're a researcher, you're attached to a university or a program. If you're a teacher, you're attached to an institution. If you're a student, you're in a class. So build bonds, create or build bonds so that you are able to share knowledge and get knowledge and be able to, as they say here on the slide, make informed decision making. That doesn't happen in a vacuum. And I think this is my final slide. It's a quiz. You can do it on your own. We have just 5 minutes left. I can't believe we've gotten to the end of our webinar. If you have questions, please consider asking them in the chat, because your questions might be someone else's questions and they might feel hesitant to ask, but you shouldn't. So go ahead and ask your questions, make comments. Let's leave with some powerful takeaways. Anything?
Not yet.
Please consider
How Esther said that she's not
posting
creative in
something you've
designing
learned.
lesson plans. How can she overcome the first impression bias?
Sorry, repeat the question.
Okay, I read the question again. I am not creative in designing lesson plans. How can I overcome the first impression bias?
First impression bias. So again, you're going to hate me for repeating it. Join a learning community. Get involved talking to other people about your lesson plans. They can help you to improve on them. They can help you with that first impression bias, right? If you're talking to other people who are successfully delivering plans, lesson plans, and maybe they can walk into a room and command the room in a way that you can't, or their content is pretty exciting and somehow they're getting their students engaged. Talk to them. Find out how they are doing that. Don't isolate yourself and think, oh, I can't do this. Positive self-talk is really important. But also just make sure that you are not painting yourself into a corner. The only way you're going to get out of it is by getting help. So make sure that you join a community, start a community if you must. But if you're a teacher, as I said, you've got people all the way around you. It doesn't have to be a teacher in your discipline. It can be a teacher across the curriculum who maybe it's a math teacher or a history teacher who just has a very dynamic way of presenting material. Talk to them. Talk to them. Anything else?
No, but I'm afraid that this is the time to end the webinar today. Thank you very much, Melita, for a wonderful webinar, and thank you for preparing everything for this. And I think this is a reward for those of you who actively participated in the webinar and stayed with us until now. You have typed your email address in the chat box. We will collect your email address and request American Center in Hanoi to create eLibrary USA for you. As Melita shared during the workshop, eLibrary USA is a very useful resource for research purpose, for academic purpose, and next week you will receive emails from American Center, and it requires you to spend about 30 minutes or 45 minutes for an online training to get a certificate about using eLibrary. Once you have the certificate, the e-certificate, you will, take a screenshot of that certificate and get in again, log in again, and post that e-certificate in the eLibrary USA. And after that, you will be able to log into eLibrary USA for your free use in, I don't know, for about 1 to 2 years. And it's great already. I'm sorry, this guidance is not really clear, but we will send email to you after this workshop. So we will leave the webinar open for in the next 10 minutes. For those of you who don't know this information, please type your email in the chat box, and we'll collect all the emails and send you accounts to eLibrary USA. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us today. See you again on April the 25th. It's also Friday, April 25th for the second webinar, and also the last webinar on information literacy and research skills. Thank you very much from our team from SEAMEO RETRAC and American Spaces Hanoi. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Melita. See you again.